In the first moments of a collapse, concerns are predictable. People rush to supermarkets, fill carts with canned food, bottled water, batteries. They lock doors, check weapons, test generators. The human mind prioritizes the immediate: hunger, thirst, cold, visible danger. But there is a silent threat that grows invisible in the first days, and that kills faster than any food scarcity: sanitation. When water stops flowing, faucets run dry. When sewage stops draining, toilets fill up. And in most modern residences, nobody knows what to do next. Flushing becomes a useless reflex action. The bathroom, which was invisible throughout life, suddenly transforms into the house's biggest problem. And this problem doesn't disappear. It accumulates, literally. Human waste doesn't stop being produced because infrastructure failed. Each person generates between 200 and 500 grams of feces and up to 2 liters of urine per day. Multiply that by a family of 4. Multiply by a week, by a month. Without proper management, this becomes the perfect environment for proliferation of bacteria, parasites, diseases. Cholera, dysentery, typhoid, hepatitis A, all thrive in conditions of poor sanitation. And they kill fast. This documentary does not deal with distant hypothetical scenarios. It deals with a problem that arises in the first 24 hours of any collapse that interrupts water and sewage. And it presents 12 real, tested, practical ways to manage human waste, maintain minimum hygiene, and prevent contamination when all modern infrastructure disappears. They are not comfortable solutions. They are not pleasant. But they work. And in prolonged collapses, functionality matters more than comfort. The first and most obvious solution is the emergency dry toilet. It's not new technology. It's ancestral. Peoples around the world used variations of this for millennia before modern sewage systems existed. The emergency version is simple: a sturdy bucket, an improvised seat, thick plastic bags as lining, and absorbent material like sawdust, wood ash, or sand. The principle is straightforward. You do your business inside the plastic bag lining the bucket. After each use, immediately cover the waste with a generous layer of sawdust or ash. This absorbs liquids, drastically reduces odor, and initiates aerobic decomposition. When the bag is full, never more than 3/4 capacity, you seal it, remove it, and dispose of it safely. Safe disposal is where most people fail. You don't throw it in common trash that nobody will collect. You don't leave it accumulating in the yard. The correct method depends on context. If there's space and adequate soil, bury it in deep holes away from water sources, at least 60 centimeters deep. If there's no space, temporary storage needs to be in an isolated location, sealed, away from inhabited areas, until final disposal is possible. Odor is the biggest psychological challenge. Wood ash is superior to sawdust in this aspect. Ash is alkaline, neutralizes acids in waste, controls smell remarkably. If you have a fireplace or wood stove, you have infinite supply of ash. If you don't, sawdust works, but requires greater volume per use. Emergency dry toilet is not an ideal permanent solution, but it's implementable in minutes, works immediately, requires few materials, and can be maintained for weeks or months, while more robust solutions are established. It's the bridge between sudden collapse and functional organization. The second form is the improvised composting toilet. Unlike the basic dry emergency toilet, this method aims to transform waste into something eventually usable. It's not quick, it's not simple, but it's sustainable long-term. The basic concept, human waste, when correctly mixed with carbon-rich materials like dry leaves, straw, sawdust, and maintained in adequate aerobic conditions, decomposes into compost. But there are rigid rules. Composting human feces requires elevated temperatures to kill pathogens. We're talking about 55 degrees Celsius or more, maintained for weeks. This doesn't happen in small or poorly managed piles. The improvised version works like this. A large container, a 200-liter plastic barrel works, is prepared with ventilation holes on the side and base to allow airflow. Alternating layers of waste and carbon-rich material are added. The ratio is critical. At least 3 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. Human waste is rich in nitrogen. Dry leaves, sawdust, straw are carbon. Moisture needs to be controlled. Too dry, decomposition stops. Too wet, it rots without oxygen and generates nauseating odors. The mixture should feel like a squeezed, damp sponge. If water drips when squeezed, it's too wet. Add more carbon. If it crumbles into powder, it's too dry. Add water, but carefully. Internal temperature increases as microorganisms work. This heat is what kills pathogens. Without sufficient heat, you're just storing dangerous waste, not composting. Checking temperature requires a compost thermometer, something few have in emergencies. Without verification, the safe method is to never use this compost on edible vegetable gardens. Use only on trees, ornamental shrubs, away from any food chain. Composting human waste is viable, but requires knowledge, constant monitoring, and patience of months. It's not for beginners under pressure. But if you have space, time, and are willing to learn, it transforms a permanent problem into a resource. The third form is the trench latrine, a military method used for centuries. Simple, effective, requires only a shovel. Dig a long, narrow trench, approximately 30 centimeters wide, 60 to 90 centimeters deep, length as needed. Use the trench progressively, covering each deposit with a layer of soil immediately after use. The soil acts as an immediate barrier against flies, reduces odor, initiates anaerobic decomposition. When the trench is almost full, cover it completely with at least 60 centimeters of soil, compacted. Mark the location to avoid accidental future excavation. Open a new trench in a different location. Location is critical. Never less than 30 meters from any water source, rivers, lakes, wells. Never in an area that can flood. Never where the water table is shallow. The idea is that waste decomposes in deep soil, away from any contact with water that will be used for consumption or hygiene. Trench latrines work best in rural environments with available space. In dense urban areas, in apartments, on small properties, they're impractical. But if you have a yard, land, open space, it's one of the most straightforward and hygienic solutions when implemented correctly. Most people resist psychologically. The idea of digging holes in the yard to defecate seems degrading. But degradation doesn't kill. Diseases kill. And well-managed trenches prevent diseases more effectively than modern bathrooms without functioning water or sewage. The fourth form involves using the toilet itself, but in a completely different way. When there's no running water, flushes don't work. But the toilet can still be used if you manually manage waste removal. The method: line the inside of the toilet bowl with a thick, resistant plastic bag. Use normally. After use, add absorbent material as in the bucket method. Remove the bag, seal it, dispose of it as previously described. The psychological advantage is enormous. People maintain familiar routine. They sit where they always sat. The sense of normalcy reduces stress, especially for children, elderly, people with mobility difficulties. Maintaining psychological structure matters in collapses. Small continuities help. The disadvantage is waste of plastic bags. In prolonged collapses, plastic becomes a finite valuable resource. Each bag used for waste is a bag that cannot be used to store food, water, tools. The decision becomes a question of prioritization. Psychological comfort versus resource conservation. Another issue: if the local sewage system is completely stopped, and everyone in the building or neighborhood continues using toilets in some way, waste can return through plumbing, causing backflow in lower floor bathrooms. This has already happened in prolonged blockages in tall buildings. The preventive solution is to completely seal the toilet drain after emptying all water from the bowl, using an improvised hermetic lid or tightly secured plastic bag. This prevents return of contaminated material. Using the toilet as a base for a bag system works, but requires attention to details that most don't consider until it's too late. The fifth form is the so-called double bucket toilet, a variation of the basic dry toilet, but with separation of urine and feces. Urine is sterile when it leaves the body of a healthy person. Feces are not. Mixing the two creates a liquid mass difficult to manage and highly contaminating. Separating simplifies everything. The system uses two containers, one for urine, another for feces. Commercial designs of separation dry toilets exist, but improvised versions work. A wide, shallow funnel connected to a collection container for urine. A separate bucket with seat for feces, managed as described in the basic dry toilet method. Urine can be diluted, 1 part urine to 10 parts water, and used as nitrogen-rich liquid fertilizer. Not directly on leafy vegetables or edible roots, but around fruit trees, shrubs, ornamental plants. After a few days of storage, urine becomes even more alkaline, reducing residual pathogens. Feces, managed dry without mixing with liquids, become easier to handle, less smelly, faster to decompose when added to adequate composting systems. Separation requires discipline. Users need to adjust posture, position, especially women and children. There's a learning curve. But after a few days, it becomes routine. And the benefits in terms of waste management are substantial. Double bucket toilet is for those willing to actively manage sanitation long-term, not just survive the first days. It's planning, not improvisation. The sixth form is the use of lime or ash for direct chemical treatment of feces. Quicklime, specifically calcium oxide, is highly alkaline. When applied generously over fresh feces, it drastically raises pH, killing bacteria, viruses, parasites. It also dehydrates waste, reducing volume and odor. The method: after defecating in a bucket, trench, or other container, immediately cover with a thick layer of lime, not a pinch, a layer that completely conceals the waste. The chemical reaction is fast. Odor disappears almost instantly. Pathogens begin dying within minutes. Lime is cheap and widely available at construction material stores, storable indefinitely if kept dry. A 20-kilogram bag lasts weeks for a small family. It's a low-cost investment with immense return in collapse conditions. Precautions: lime is caustic. Prolonged contact with skin causes chemical burns. Dust inhalation irritates lungs. Use gloves when handling. Avoid breathing dust. Keep away from children. But respecting basic precautions, it's a safe and effective method. Wood ash works similarly, though less potent than lime. But it's free if you burn wood for cooking or heating. The alkalinity of ash still raises pH, controls odor, inhibits pathogens. It's a viable alternative if lime isn't available. Chemical treatment with lime or ash doesn't eliminate the need for proper disposal. It just makes waste safer to handle and store temporarily. But in terms of immediate odor and pathogen control, it's one of the most effective solutions. The seventh form involves personal hygiene without running water, specifically cleaning after toilet use. Toilet paper is a finite resource. Stocks run out. And even when available, cleaning only with dry paper is not hygienic. It leaves residue on skin, increases risk of infections, discomfort. Traditional alternatives used globally include water and hand, a method common in much of Asia, the Middle East, Africa. It works like this. After defecating, use your left hand and a small amount of water for direct cleaning. The right hand never touches that area. After cleaning, wash the left hand thoroughly with soap and water. In cultures that have used this method for generations, rigid separation between left hand for cleaning and right hand for eating is absolute norm. For people raised with toilet paper, this seems repulsive. But repulsion is not a logical argument. It works. It's more hygienic than dry paper, uses minimal amount of water, and when paper isn't available, it's an immediate practical solution. If water is also extremely scarce, alternatives include large soft leaves, moss, smooth stones, clean snow in cold climates. All have been used historically. They're not ideal, but they're better than nothing. Another option: reusable cleaning cloths. Soft fabric cut into small squares, used for cleaning, then washed in boiling water with soap or alkaline ash for sterilization. Reusable indefinitely. Requires discipline and a strong stomach, but works. Inadequate anal hygiene leads to infections, irritations, diseases. It's not a detail. It's a critical necessity. And in collapses, it's one of the first hygiene aspects people neglect, with serious consequences. The eighth form deals with hand hygiene, the central point of disease prevention. Without running water, without antibacterial soap, how do you keep hands clean enough not to contaminate food, mouth, wounds? Water and common soap are sufficient. Soap doesn't need to be antibacterial. The mechanical action of scrubbing with soap removes dirt, oils, and most pathogens. Rinsing with clean water removes residue. Simple, effective. But when water is scarce, every drop counts. Solution: low-volume hand-washing stations. A container with small faucet or controlled hole that releases a thin stream of water. Wet hands minimally, soap without running water, rinse with thin stream. Uses less than half a liter per wash, compared to several liters with open faucet. Soap can be made at home from animal fat and ash. Ancestral method, laborious, but viable. Wood ash contains potassium hydroxide. When combined with fat and heated, saponification occurs, creating functional soap. It's not luxurious. It doesn't smell good, but it cleans. Alcohol-based hand sanitizer is an alternative when water isn't available. Isopropyl alcohol above 60% concentration kills most pathogens. Small amount rubbed on hands until dry. Portable, effective. But doesn't remove visible dirt. Doesn't replace complete washing. In collapses, infections begin with dirty hands touching face, food, wounds. Hand hygiene is not optional. It's the primary line of defense against diseases that kill when antibiotics aren't available. The ninth form focuses on menstrual waste management, an aspect frequently ignored in collapse planning. Women of childbearing age menstruate. This doesn't stop because infrastructure failed. Disposable pads and tampons are finite resources. Stocks run out. And then what? Reusable alternatives include silicone menstrual cups, cloth pads, absorbent underwear. Menstrual cups can last years with proper care. Empty, wash with soap and water, reinsert. Uses minimal amount of water. Generates no waste. Cloth pads are pieces of absorbent fabric folded or sewn into specific shapes, used like disposable pads, but washed and reused. Require careful washing in hot water with soap, preferably boiled for sterilization. Sun drying adds UV disinfection. If even that isn't available, improvised fabrics, old towels, cut sheets, any clean cotton, work temporarily. They're not comfortable. They're not efficient, but they prevent environmental contamination and maintain basic dignity. Disposal of used menstrual products. When there's no trash collection becomes a problem. Disposable pads don't decompose quickly. Burning them generates toxic smoke. Burying them creates persistent biological waste. Most viable solution: transition to reusable methods before collapse. Menstruation is not a medical emergency, but inadequate management causes discomfort, infections, embarrassment, loss of mobility. Planning for this is as important as planning for any other continuous human need. The 10th form addresses complete body cleaning without running water. Baths consume dozens of liters. unsustainable when water is scarce. But body hygiene is still necessary. Sweat, dirt, bacteria accumulate. Odor worsens. Morale plummets. Skin infections increase. Solution: sponge baths. Use a basin with small amount of warm water, clean cloth or sponge, soap. Wash body in parts: face, neck, armpits, groin, feet. Areas that sweat most, areas with skin folds. Rinse the cloth in the basin between areas. 1 to 2 liters of water are sufficient for effective complete cleaning. Priority goes to critical areas. Feet, especially between toes, to prevent fungal infections. Armpits and groin, to control bacteria that cause odor and irritation. Face and hands, for psychological comfort and prevention of cross-contamination. Water used in sponge baths can be reused for floor cleaning, improvised flushing, irrigation of non-edible plants. Nothing is wasted. Hair can be washed with minimal amount of water using homemade dry shampoo technique. Baking soda rubbed into scalp absorbs oiliness. Brush to remove. Doesn't replace complete washing, but keeps hair manageable for days or weeks between real washes. Body cleanliness is not vanity. It's disease prevention. Clean skin resists infections better. Morale is maintained. Dignity persists. And in prolonged collapses, morale and dignity are as important to survival as food and water. The 11th form deals with management of non-human organic waste. Food scraps, peels, bones. Without trash collection, organic waste rots, attracts pests, generates diseases. Flies proliferate, rats appear, bacteria spread. Composting kitchen waste is obvious solution. Unlike composting human feces, vegetable scraps, fruit peels, grains, coffee grounds decompose easily without significant sanitary risks. Simple pile in yard, watered occasionally, becomes usable compost in months. But in urban environments without yards, traditional composting is impractical. Alternative: vermicomposting. Worms process organic waste quickly, produce rich compost, occupy minimal space. Plastic or wood box, layer of soil, red worms, food scraps added regularly. Works in apartments, balconies, small spaces. Meat scraps, bones, fat should not go into home composting. They attract animals, rot with unbearable odor, carry pathogens. Solution: burn in open fire if possible. Resulting ash is sterile, can be discarded or used. If you can't burn, bury deeply away from residents. Poorly managed organic waste kills indirectly. Pests carry diseases. Flies land on feces, then on food. Rats bite, scratch, contaminate. Controlling waste is controlling disease vectors. The 12th form is the most difficult to implement, but the most important long-term: education and community discipline. Individual sanitation works. Community sanitation saves. If you manage waste perfectly but your neighbor throws feces in the yard next to your well, you get sick. Groundwater doesn't respect fences. In collapses, communities need to establish collective sanitary norms quickly. Designated areas for waste, away from water sources. Rules about disposal. Mutual inspections. Forced cooperation if necessary. History shows that communities that implement collective sanitation survive. Communities that don't implement it enter disease outbreaks that kill more than hunger or violence. During historical sieges, cholera killed more besieged people than bombardments. Establishing community sanitary authority, a group responsible for monitoring, educating, organizing collective waste management, is crucial. It can be informal, but it needs to exist. Someone needs to coordinate. Someone needs to impose consequences for violations. People resist. They want total autonomy. But autonomy without coordination in sanitation kills everyone. It's not politics, it's biology. Feces in the wrong place contaminate water. Contaminated water spreads diseases. Diseases kill. Simple. continuous education about hand washing, correct waste management. Separation of drinking water from contaminated water needs to be repeated constantly, especially for children. Creating habits takes weeks. Maintaining habits under stress is a constant challenge. Functional community sanitation doesn't arise naturally. It needs to be built, maintained, defended. It's laborious, it's boring. Nobody wants to lead the sanitation committee. But someone needs to, because without it, everything else fails. Sanitation is not a topic that attracts views. It's not dramatic. It's not heroic. It doesn't generate exciting conversations. But in real collapses, it's literally the difference between functional community and open-air cemetery. The 12 forms presented are not theoretical. They are methods currently used in refugee camps, disaster zones, areas without infrastructure. They work. They save lives. But they require prior knowledge, basic materials, and above all, willingness to deal with uncomfortable reality. Most people don't want to think about it. They prefer to plan arsenals, exotic food stocks, fortified shelters. They ignore that without functional sanitation, the fortified shelter becomes a stinking tomb within weeks. Clean water and waste management are the two invisible pillars of all civilization. When these pillars fall, everything else crumbles quickly. It doesn't matter how much food you have if water is contaminated. It doesn't matter how secure your shelter is if diseases proliferate inside it. Real preparation means accepting that comfort disappears. That dignity changes form. That survival involves dealing with repugnant aspects of human existence that modernity hid behind plumbing and treatment plants. Implementing any of these 12 forms requires planning before collapse. Stocking thick plastic bags, sawdust, lime, sturdy buckets, soap, basic materials. It doesn't cost much. It doesn't take up much space. But in the first week without water or sewage, it's worth more than gold. More important still, practice. Test dry toilet in the yard before needing it under pressure. Experiment with low-volume hand washing. Understand how much absorbent material is necessary. Familiarize yourself with odors, processes, challenges. When collapse arrives, there's no time to learn. There's no margin for error. Sanitation needs to work immediately, or diseases begin spreading before any other critical problem manifests. Communities that master sanitation in collapses don't just survive. They maintain social structure, morale, mental health. They continue functioning as society, not as desperate horde. The difference is invisible from outside, but absolute from inside. Sanitation is not glamorous, but it's fundamental. And in a world where modern infrastructure can fail due to storms, attacks, economic collapses, sabotage, or simple aging, knowing how to maintain basic hygiene without complex systems is not paranoia. It's responsibility. The 12 forms exist. They work. They're available. The only question is whether you'll be prepared to implement them when everything that always worked automatically simply stops. Because it will stop. The question is not if, it's when. And what you do in the first 24 hours will determine whether the next months are organized survival or biological chaos. Choose now, while you still can.